Morning, everyone. We'll allow everyone a few minutes to come in. Morning from Town Hall. Trying to stay hydrated over here because we'll be outside this afternoon. And we'll sort of be gauging our format a little bit and the amount of interactivity we have today based on some of our numbers here. So just gauging how many participants we have. And feel free to go video on or off or whatever is good for everyone, but we'll just ask everyone mute, please. Lots of faces coming in, some familiar faces I see here. Appreciate y'all joining on a Monday morning for sure. Give it a couple more minutes just to allow folks to trickle in before we get started talking. Up to a good 20 now. I'd like to see that. I'll mention it a few more times, but we do have the chat function, the question and answer function open on available today. And so I have Karen Tunisia with me, who might be fielding questions, letting us know as those come in. So feel free to take advantage of that. See him already. Thank you, Paul. See Andy there. I gotta try to go on and get this screen share and get us started. 1 second. Well, good morning, folks. Glad to see several of you here. I'm excited we get some time to chat today. A smallish size group, so I hope it allows us to be able to chat and interact some. For those of you who do not know, this is we're talking about Kiawah Next Plan, doing a virtual open house of where we stand with sort of our comprehensive plan overview. So a lot to cover here today, but hope everyone has a general understanding of what we're covering. If not, I just want to clarify what all this is. What is Kiawah Next? This is the town's continued effort to shape the next comprehensive plan going forward, based both on state recommendations and or state requirements, and also sort of general good practices. We do these every 10 years, and it's really nice to do that because when you're looking at the 10 years, you're thinking about 10 years previous, what's happened in the last little decade, what do we need to think about, what changes have occurred, and also projecting for and thinking about the following 10 years. So really a nice window of time to look at. The goal of long-term planning of this kind is to be aspirational for so many folks in different institutions, in different entities across the island, different town departments. It's easy to get your head buried in the day-to-day. So these long-term planning opportunities are a great time to look out, think very, very big picture, think aspirational, not what are we bound to in certain constraints for by today, but what are big picture goals that we can achieve beyond the everyday. So we're definitely trying to get our head in that type of headspace. It's a really healthy thing to do every 10 years or so. The town in this capacity is responsible for all the facets of the community's well-being. Certainly Kiawah was a very interesting place where we have a lot of different players and key stakeholders across the island. So I see Leah from Kika on here. Certainly Kika, the resort, Kiawah Partners, all of these different entities playing certain roles, but certainly as the town's thinking about its responsibility, there's a number of things that sort of the buck stops with the town. So trying to think about all those in a big picture way. In order to comply with the state requirements, these comp plans must factor in 10 big buckets of information. It's sort of what you would expect, but what we are thinking about are the big picture conversations around demographics and population, economic development, natural resources and the environment, cultural resources and community amenities, community facilities and infrastructure, housing, land use and regulation, mobility and transportation, priority investments, which is really, we kind of skim over that today. It sort of comes out of the process, what big priority investments rise to the surface, and resiliency, which is the newest one that the state is now asking of all these municipalities, thinking beyond just environment and sustainability, but really what does it mean to be resilient to acute shocks and stressors, which is important certainly for coastal communities of this type. So we're going to run through a little bit of this all today, and we'll be able to kind of take some questions at the end. But I think there's a few big pieces of information we want to convey before we get into a little bit more the ability to open up to questions. Where we are in the process. So 3 big stages here in this work. First, assessing the landscape. Then empowering, and then moving into implementation. So my name is Blake here, as you see here. I'm with LS3P. We are working in coordination with Kimberly Horn, 2 firms who have spent a great deal of time working here in and around Kiawah. We enjoy saying this building that I'm sitting in a town hall was built by us, built and designed by us, as well as a number of other buildings on the island. So we are a planning and design firm. Kimberly Horn has done lots of engineering here across the island, currently thinking on the parkway and potential improvements and changes. So we've been here a long time. We're deeply invested in this place. And so for us, this assessment was not only taking what we know, but also doing this deep dive into this community engagement. So you've seen the signs and work around the Kiawah Next. You've probably hopefully taken the survey at some point. So that's all fed into this phase 1, where we're getting the planning team together, studying the community feedback. And what we've done thus far then is start to determine operational priorities and thinking about goals and objectives for what this plan can accomplish. So that's really where we are in the phase of the work. In the future phase, we're going to turn some of those goals and objectives that we're discussing today, and we're going to start to turn them into implementable plans, really thinking about a hard course of action, thinking about the plans, policies, and programs that help to get us there. So in some ways, the goals and objectives is the what we're trying to do. Later, we're going to get into the how, we're going to get into the who's going to take these things on. We're going to into questions about, things that are priority, assigning budget, all those pieces. But before we get into that level of implementation, it is important that we all sort of align and gain some consensus around what these goals and objectives are. So that's where we are in the process. Moving forward with that, once we determine those pieces, then we'll actually start into preparing a final plan. And certainly along the way, we will be keeping everyone posted so you can get involved in opportunities like this for feedback. There are four key critical inputs that go into this planning effort. Community engagement, working with community is one of those. It's the work that we're doing today. It's the work that we've been doing through this survey and through other conversations. The second bucket that we're looking at is stakeholder engagement. So that's a lot of key stakeholders that represent some of the entities previously mentioned. We've had conversations with the resort, with Kika, with the Conservancy, as well as important key town staff members, folks who work for Kiawah Island. Utility, saw Paul's question earlier, have we chatted with utilities? Yes, getting an understanding of that. So understanding who are those important stakeholders that are subject matter experts in certain ways that need to be informing the plan. We had 36 different conversations with various folks related to their subject matter to help feed this plan. There's best practices that we're using, looking across the country and across the globe. Certainly Kiawah is a very special place, but there's also certain things where other places where other coastal communities are doing things that we can learn from, other resort communities, making sure that there's sort of thoughtfulness to those. And then just analysis, what's going on, what can we account for that's definitely changed in the last 10 years, an understanding of some of these population changes and other things. So this is all the four pieces that go into feeding this plan. So certainly the community and community input is vital, but we do have to work out some of these trade-offs to make sure we get all of these things fed in to make the best possible comprehensive plan that we can. Once we actually get into a plan, it becomes something really actionable. For those of you who may or may not have looked into these types of documents going forward, how they work, definitely creating a strong series of goals. This is a sort of precedent document that we have looked at with the Planning Commission, who's helping to lead this effort with us, really thinking about something that's clear, that's actionable, so that's turned into a series of goals that are written out in one portion of the body of the document that explain what those goals would be, and then sort of an implementation appendix that lays out what the actual steps are, who the responsible parties are, so there's clarity about that, time frame of an understanding of what these goals will be, and then understanding other commitments of resources, whether that's cost, staffing, the potential hiring of other outside entities or consultants, and really making this absolutely clear. So this becomes the guidebook, the playbook for the next decade as the town moves forward with its priorities in coordination with other entities on the island. So today's expectations, we are going to be reviewing, as I mentioned, the preliminary goals and objectives, so the beginning of the high level hopes that we have here for the plan, what we hope it to accomplish. And really the question that we're asking with each of these is really simply put, it's asking, should we pursue each of these items further? If there's any uncertainty, we err on the side of retaining these items and letting future phases address them. So hopefully we're on track, but if there's anything that feels inappropriate, we can strike it from the list. Otherwise, we want to keep studying these things more as we get into these questions about implementation that helps form another type of filter if things are not appropriate for what we're doing. This step is one stepping stone on the journey towards the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned before, we're thinking about implementation in the future. And as always, we are asking what is best for Kiawah. And we have forced to put on eyes to look across all these various stakeholders, not just who we are, who we represent, but also other stakeholders, whether it be the Conservancy, resort, everyone, making sure we think about the whole ecosystem of what's best for Kiawah. So I think one thing that's important to level set is what we've been thinking about, what's happening, as we said, thinking about the past 10 years and the future 10 years. The last 10 years, we've noted real four powerful changes that have occurred, that have filtered into thinking a lot. One, I think the most significant is just the changing island demographics. They really imply a different type of community. So I think everyone here is kind of aware of this, that due to COVID and the way that COVID is reacting on the island, there's much more of a full-time occupation of the island. It's no longer has the big ebbs and flows of a resort community. And in those ways, in the way that we as sort of planners view the island, it's not really acting like a resort in that per se with the ups and downs anymore. There's much more of a full-time occupation as well. When you look at the last 10 years, you are talking about much more a much more developed build out of the overall plan. And so because of that, the overall absolute numbers for whom we've been planning for rises significantly. When you're thinking of a resort community, you typically plan for about 3/4 of that. So at the highest peaks, there may be things where systems are taxed, but for the rest of the year, those things are sort of over planned for. With thinking about a full-time community, you must be planning for max occupation. And so with that, as well as the overall population increase due to development, we are planning for a much more significant place, a town that's performing as a full-time community now. So that causes big shifts in how we think about some of these things. I know that most as we've heard from gobs and gobs of community engagement, one of the biggest complaints obviously is around traffic, vehicular congestion, which is one sign of this greater occupation of the island, but as well the increased use of all of the island's amenities, whether it's be pools, clubs, restaurants that are harder to get into. I'm feeling like a lot of the island's amenities are just really kind of taxed or at their brink right now. So you can really sense that new occupation of the island in a new way. So thinking about that, factoring all that. Number two, looking at the country has embraced major shifts in environmental thinking. This has become critical in the way that we understand some of the forces at play here in Kiawah. A lot of the work has been done from everything from this marsh management plan that the town has commissioned, as well as of other studies from the Conservancy and other places that really asking us to think and behave in different way. The Conservancy doing studies about ways that residents can embrace rain garden and other tools that can be helped to control stormwater and flooding, and some of these issues that become a little bit more pervasive and a little bit more of making the island slightly more vulnerable. And so we understand some of those ways, some of those things in ways that we can change our actions to embrace them. Also, just there's this uneasiness in general about these vulnerable places across the country, and there's a premium put on resilient places, and we certainly want to be a resilient one. Number three, consumer preferences continue to change, and competitive entities and developments are now the norm. Sometimes I think as a regular community member and a resident, it can be hard to remember that towns do have to think of themselves as a business in a way, in order to stay financially viable, in order just to retain real estate values that we know are important here to folks. It is important that a place remain competitive, and for many years now, it's been Kiawah Partners and a number of other groups who've been playing the roles to make sure that we're delivering the amenities that people are looking for, to sort of listen to the community and respond in different ways. But what was developed originally as Kiawah, years ago, there's now a lot of similar communities around that are developing this. Certainly none that have done exactly what Kiawah's done, which makes it really, really special. But in terms of what the town's role, it is important that the place would continue to be competitive in that way, relevant to what people's wants and needs are. And lastly, I think a major change that certainly the town is thinking about is, as some of these development agreements are sunsetting and Kiawah Partners is significantly reducing their roles in some ways, what will the town pick up in here? Under, as I mentioned here previously, the partners have been one of the key entities in making sure that the island is responsible to changing consumer preferences over the years. So who's going to pick up that role now? The partners have maintained a long-term commitment to marketing the place, which is helping to drive folks here, which is a role that someone needs to pick up. as well. There's a sense that certainly from the town's income, as some of this new development begins to slow, as we're very close to full build out, making sure that there is some economic security in that. So this is a number of forces. There's a lot of other things changing, but a lot of ways we heard again and again during the community engagement, folks said, we're really, really happy with what Kiawah is. We don't want a lot to change. We're happy with the character of the place that we've created. And certainly that is key to all of this work, but we do have to respond to some of these other changing forces that are going on. So we're going to jump into the goals and objectives, but we just want to point out these 4 big things before we move in. I think most of these goals and objectives, as we get into them, there's a bunch of them are going to be pretty straightforward and hopefully clear. But we do want to mention these 4 that are what we call in their planning world knotty challenges. And by knotty here, KNOTTY, knotty challenges, we mean challenges that are all interwoven, that you can't take out any one piece by itself and study it and look at it and change it, but it's all interwoven. So this is times where mobility is interwoven with, with housing, which is interwoven with economic development. So we have to look at these in a big picture sense before we get into the remainder of this slide deck, which is broken down by those categories that we previously mentioned, the state requirements. So some of these are 4 big issues that cross over those categories because of their knotty, complex nature. So one of the big changes or big goals that we're looking at is sort of as whole scale mobility improvements. And so certainly every entity that we talked to in all this engagement said traffic congestion is the island's #1 problem. That was business owners, that was residents, anyone involved, and the effects on it are great. From simple just inconvenience to issues around health and safety, emergency response. No matter who we talk to, this came up. And so really this plan is thinking about what are the options of really big whole-scale improvements. There's been a lot of planning work done on the parkway, studies about ways that it can be improved. Certainly lots of folks have strong feelings about the way that the gate functions at the front, how it could be changed. And all of those things are kind of smaller band-aids, but the plan is actually proposing, what if we think bigger than that? For folks who don't think about this and the way that we do, there are very different kinds of street patterns and street grids in the world, but there's sort of 2 extreme ends. On one end, there's a perfect rectilinear grid, something like Manhattan. And on the other far end, there's what we call a dendritic street grid. And a dendritic grid means something that takes the organic nature of a tree, where you have a tree trunk at the base, with big limbs coming out of that and with smaller limbs coming out, but everything coming back to the same trunk. And that dendritic pattern is what you experience here at Kiawah, in the sense that all roads lead back to the parkway and come back through that. And so it serves really a lot of ways as a choke point, a pinch point, and you add on top of that the causeway and a gate, these even more extreme pinch points. And when you think about that, you realize that in a lot of ways, some of these traffic congestion problems are in nature of the design of that. And so questions, there's only so many band-aids that you can put on the parkway. And so we do find ourselves asking big questions, is there a way to put an entirely new, bridge, access to the island, or something like ferry access that provides a whole another connection point? Some of those ideas seem big and they seem huge, but this is when you're thinking about aspirational long-term planning, those are the types of solutions that you look at here. So we're asked to think about those, and when we heard again and again and again, traffic is an issue, we have to be able to start trying to address that in a real way, as opposed to some of these sort of band-aid things. So I'm hoping to address that. So you'll see that play out in a few different ways here. Some of it is just also changes to not only what the physical roadway system is, but also the way that people move through it. And so trying to think of solutions that reduce the number of individual vehicular trips, and making some of those trips in places that you're going to slightly more convenient, more desirable, making other options of how to get around more pleasant and safe, so that there's not just whole-scale reliance on the street grid to do all the work of moving folks in and around the island. So that's one whole big category of things that we're going to be thinking about. 2 is expanded amenity options. We heard this again and again and again from your feedback, is that there is just a sense that all of the important amenities are overtaxed a little bit. that there's a need for additional mix of kind of cultural, social, recreational amenities. This doesn't mean something crazy, different, huge, just more of them, a little bit more variety, some entities delivering some cultural assets as well. And so how do we think about that? I think everyone acknowledges that what's special about Kiawah is this comfortable, serene, residential character that's so intertwined with its natural setting. And so how do we preserve that while also considering ways to get some of these amenities closer to folks, to get more of them on the island? There's questions about who provides those. There's questions about amenities that are related to Kiawah club members versus others. So a lot of questions need to be answered, but they all involve coordination between the resort, between Kika, between all these different entities. And so certainly there's a chance to think about it now at a big picture level, to coordinate all the conversations and figure out what makes sense here. But certainly a need for that. We heard a lot of folks say just looking for some informal gathering spaces. People really love, the secret sauce of the nest being just this flexible space that people can kind of come and hop in and out of. Is their ability to create some more spaces like that closer to folks that really are beneficial in building, fostering a sense of community, providing family activity places. So we're trying to think through a lot of those, and those questions cross over a lot of these categories. The third of these knotty complex issues is just this economic development questions. Like I said, a lot of this has to do with the changing nature of some of this economic, or some of the development build out occurring after it is sort of the first wave of this development after the island's built out. A lot of this drops off. So how do we ensure that there is a long-term economic well-being for all the entities involved? There's a need to think about what, as properties each reach the end of their useful life, what, if anything, does redevelopment look like? Is that something that's valuable to the island? Is that something that wants to be controlled in some ways? What is, there's an ongoing question about annexation, about what does that look like to potentially work with the land adjacent to, just outside the island, in and around Freshfields area. And right now there's real questions in terms of the economic development, what goals that serves and how that's beneficial to the town, to residents and others. But again, it requires a lot of coordinated conversations. And so the plan wants to dream big about that and really say, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish, and what would it mean to get everyone coordinated in that effort? And lastly, just here, there is the questions about diversity of housing. When we say diversity of housing, we mean not only just the housing types, but also affordability here. There was a housing study done just before COVID that really indicated that there's a lot of folks looking for different options here, whether that's, let's say a young family whose parents live out here and they're spending time here in rentals here, but they can't find a price point that allows them to purchase out here and have a part-time resident here where they can have a relationship with their family. So because the development of the island has been 100% market-led up to date, it's not asked, so it's always been kind of thinking about what has been the highest and best use for the developer, is not always asked, are there certain types that for certain family units that make more sense. And so that really, that study was done pre-COVID. It noted the need for a diversity of some of these housing types and the ability to kind of welcome in new future members of the community who right now don't have necessarily a stepping stone to get in. Obviously, COVID changed a lot of things. So right now, there's not any one person owning an understanding of what makes sense from a housing perspective if there is any changing needs. As I mentioned before, some of the properties on the island are reaching the end of their useful life. What does it look like if they're redeveloped? Do they just want to stay the same zoning right now where it allows that use? Or is there a different housing type or something that would make sense for them to change over to? So really thinking about all of those things. There's coordination there around the land use plan, around zoning, around working with ARB to figure out which makes sense. So really, in most other municipalities, places we work, housing is one of the most important pushes because it controls so much of the experience of what community is there, defining who the community is. And so we just want to have a thoughtfulness to that. And right now, as the partners have been driving some of those conversations, as we think about the next 10 years and even going forward after that, who's driving that conversation. And I think right now it's not 100% clear. So really, there's a lot of need to understand that. Certainly there have been around different conversations around disagreement with what happened at the Cape and some of the NDL West and some of these other things going past. I think it's brought to the table lots of different conversations about what people do and don't want. We just want to make sure all of that is captured so it's known going forward. All right, covered a lot here. I'm going to keep moving. So as I said, we are going to pop into these draft goals and objectives. I only have one question. So again, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. To Paul, to those questions, Paul's first questions, well, what lesson did we learn from the last comp plan? How are those lessons influenced this year? So yes, in our workshop that's driven by us and the Planning Commission, whose task it is to drive this, we did look through all of the goals and objectives from the previous comp plan and decided with each of those which ones needed to be brought forward. So which things had we accomplished, had we done well, and what things do we need to bring forward. So in these goals and objectives that you see here, a few of them are almost just exact copies and paste from the last comp plan of things that really Kiawah still needed to work on, where others, it was nice to say that we've made great strides in the last 10 years. So all of that was very much taken into consideration, really actually kind of is the underpinnings of the remainder of this presentation that you see going forward. The second question Paul asked is, did the town incorporate an assessment of key municipal utilities, water, waste, power, and internet? Yeah, so we had conversations not only with Kiawah Island Utility to understand what utilities goals are going forward, but also an understanding of these other services as they are provided by various folks. So there's some of these things, internet, for a great example, it's sort of a split thing. Oh, and Wi-Fi as well was another one that came up. There's struggles on the east end of the island with some of the signal of kind of who is providing that, which is a little bit of a complex answer, but certainly the answer with so many of these conversations, as we've learned here at Kiawah, is just improved coordination between all of these entities who have been working a little bit in parallel recently, but everyone sees the need to work better and to share a little bit more about goals, resources, and reduce kind of some of this redundancy and some of these, a few things that have maybe fallen through the cracks because there's not been clear ownership of some of those. So you'll see that certainly is a really important goal in here going forward is that coordination. All right, again, feel free to chime in if you got more questions, but otherwise I'm going to roll in here and get into this. So the first of these categories here being economic well-being. So each of these, you'll see a number, you'll see the blue text, which is the goal and objective, and then you'll see some black bullet points, which are just supportive text to a little bit further identify what you're looking at here. With all of these, I just want to clarify this slide deck will be posted on our website, on the Kiawah Next website. You'll see it as well. There is a tool on there where you can provide additional feedback. So if there's questions or thoughts that we don't get to in this time together, feel free to go on there, open-ended. You can list any feedback that you want. We will take that very seriously. All of it you're looking at today is built on previous planning efforts and the feedback of the community. So please feel free to use all that. We can post a link, Kara, maybe in the chat to those things so that you have those as well. So, yep, jumping in, first goal that we see here is safeguard Kiawah's economic viability across changing conditions. So certainly that is an important one. Again, just making sure, again, as a resident, sometimes you don't think about the place that you live sort of acting as a business, but certainly that's critical. The health and well-being of a place's its ability to fund key things like infrastructure, amenities. Those are critical to sustaining who you are. And so got to keep that important and put it one of the first ones. creating economic long-term strategy. It considers these past, present, imminent changes. And certainly what's a major shift going forward is a reduction in some of these development agreements, development fees, and some of the roles of the partners that just sort of change a little bit of the formula that's been working here. Number two, looking at complete the island's development in a manner that balances the preservation of natural resources with economic development. So certainly this has been really what has been hands down, no questions asked, the most special thing about this place is the ability to balance with the natural environment and be a place that celebrates this natural setting. And so we want to complete the island's development, but we also want to make sure these natural resources are protected. A lot of strings tied to this across various parties, be it the Conservancy, be it ARB, and the means that they are developing places. But also zoning and land use as controls that restrict how or how much does not get built in this last little push. So thinking about all those pieces. Number three, consider strategies that guide future property redevelopment and annexation through the lens of economic viability and town goals. And this is just as all of these potential property redevelopment happens, or the potential for annexation, that we be sure that there's very, very clearly stated goals for why the town would take on any of those responsibilities. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate in recent years, but it's just not been the most transparent thing in terms of making 100% clear what the town's goals will be related to those, and how and why those become useful ventures. And so want to make sure that that's all considered, that it's studied, and then it's made clear to everyone involved why the town would go down those roles and what their go down this routes and what the expectations would be. Number four, assess and project commercial needs in the town. And so really this is about just this, as I said, as we're now this new full-time community, Kiawah has all the population of a town at this point, the full-time occupation town, but doesn't yet have all the trappings of a town, just because this shift has become so recently because of COVID, but really making sure that there's a tool by which we can analyze the commercial needs for Kiawah, create a means of identifying gaps, barriers, and needs in the commercial market, and then really just thinking about coordination with the resort, with other stakeholders in terms of understanding who would accommodate, who would implement and deploy any of these new structures. I think most previously in the past has been thought that the resort was going to provide all of those, and so now we're just ensuring now that the town considers it kind of the group that the buck stops with them to make sure some of these things get addressed, even if the town's not doing it themselves. And a number of these things, they aren't necessarily the town's responsibility, but the town has a obligation to think about it, make sure that some of the boxes are checked. I see questions coming up. I'm going to get through number 5. Create strategies that support the island's commercial businesses and employees. Yeah, this is just making sure that all these pieces are working together. In the same way that the resort has been holding some of these commercial businesses with that kind of a more limited view. They've not been asked to consider all the other things that may go along with that in terms of supporting businesses throughout the year, through these business cycle, and in terms of supporting employees, whether that be transportation, housing, and the like. There's a great deal of redundancy right now with a lot of different employers providing different types of transportation to the island, different types of support that's now actually adding to vehicular congestion as well. There's lots of subsidized transportation options now that's redundant. So there's ways to streamline that, make it more efficient, get a big understanding of all those components. So just going to glance at some of these questions as we go, because we have a small enough group. I think we do that. Who would be in charge of questions regarding the sanctuary? It seems very dated and in need of a redo. So this is in charge. Any question that has the language of who is in charge of is something where this plan is critical because of the segregated nature of these different entities on the island, the resort, Kika, the Conservancy, a lot of responsibility is broken up. And so I would say almost any question that has to do with who would be in charge of, we probably won't answer during this particular push. But what this push looks to do is to increase coordination, increase communication, and also really, really clearly define who is in charge of certain things. And I think that maybe, if anything, I think I would say this from our perspective as an outside entity, it's actually surprising how successful Kiawah continues to be today, despite the fact that, or in spite of the fact that some of these things have been divided up and sort of taken on by different partners. And so we really, I think every entity we talked to said, yes, there's a huge appetite to coordinate better. And so certainly in terms of who is responsible for various things, this increased coordination, and you'll see it again as separate bullet points when we arrive at it. We don't know who's just going to do those things just yet, but we want to make sure they get accomplished, and that becomes important. Love the ferry idea. Yeah, this is one of those things that we said this driving in today, that there's so many, some of the greatest resort places in this country are reached by ferry. And you know, as you drive in from folks who are coming from Charleston, that experience is not the most pleasant drive in. We mapped it this morning and it said 17 miles and it took us 45 minutes. All these, you know, turns and whatnot. It's not an experience that you can really ever kind of guide and control, where something like a ferry is something that does become an experience that you can curate start to finish and make sure it's really nice and a really lovely experience. And that's something that as more and more Johns Island, these other places get built out, there'll be less and less ability to kind of influence what's happening over there. Yeah, Red's Bluff presents some interesting opportunities there. Obviously, we require lots of coordination for that. Next comment, frustration with guests who have no pool to use. Can't have pool clubs during the season. They have the sandcastle. Yeah, so I think this is a question about just saying various amenity packages that are and aren't available. I'm guessing this is maybe a question about someone who has short-term renters is maybe what I'm presuming this is, and that they may not have access to all these things. Yeah, and I think this is a question where the notion about getting someone or an entity who is in charge of doing this commercial needs analysis and going out and ask this, and this is one of those things that we would certainly get to if someone is using their place for short-term rentals, of just asking them, hey, you as a not as the renter, but as the rentee, allowing your place to rent, are there things that would increase the experience of the folks who are staying at your place that would be beneficial for you? And right now there's just not a question, no one asking that entity, because like I said earlier, some of that has just landed purely on the resort in years past. Let's see. I'll keep moving then. Natural resources and the environment. Just the first clear one that we just have to write in here is just preserve and enhance Kiawah's existing natural resources. The efforts here are very clear. This is obviously one that's been copied and pasted and brought forward from previous plans, because it is critical to the landscape here on the island. So yeah, I don't know if we have to mention much more about that, but sure, certainly numerous other steps and actionable steps come from this in future phases. But right now it's just really clear that we do want to preserve and enhance those spaces. Number 7, champion the design with nature approach and its successes. I think so much of the special experience of the place here, just this world-class experience that you feel when you drive into the island, and the character of the experiences has been shaped by the design with nature approach, be it in the way that ARB is carrying out those tools and the way that other entities are working. And right now we just want to celebrate it and make sure that it creates a little bit of pride in place. And also, as you see going forward, there is a real need to help compel residents to act on some of these environmental actions. And really the way that you find that be successful in other communities is really by building a pride in what you are in the place that you're in. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we get down to number 9 as well. Number 8, define Kiawah's green initiative. As I was mentioned previously, there's just been a lot of growing shifting in this country and different mentalities about how we are responding with personal action to some of these environmental issues. And so really there's a need to define the suite of goals and tools that represent all of Kiawah's commitment to environmental action. There needs to be consensus around what that is, around these various stakeholders. So it's not right now the Conservancy saying, please go act on this, and not really having an ability to implement that through other tools. So we just want to make sure that's carried out. I think everyone agrees that how special the preservation of the environment is. And so we just need to have that laid out somewhere, and then we have the right tools to support that. Number 9, as I alluded to earlier, then is also just creating tools that can be used to incentivize action. There are so many of these things that we just need a collective action, and we want to find the right incentives to compel people to act. And one of the distinguishing element that distinguishes this community from other communities is not having the ability to use taxes as a tool to incentivize folks. And so without that, with property taxes and the other tools there, what else can you use to really encourage, to push, compel? How do you tell someone the importance of having a rain garden in their yard, or other performative features that they can use? How is it you can ask folks to be better about the tools of recycling, reusing? I know some folks are frustrated about the different days, different cycles with all these various waste removal. So how do we get folks excited about it, have pride in it, and get them to act accordingly? Lastly, maintain and expand public education and outreach, similar to the point that I'm just mentioning there, but with pretty much every environmental tool that we discussed, entity that's working to preserve the environment, almost every single person ended with, if I could just make sure that the general public, that residents, that visitors understood why we're doing what we're doing and the value of these things, then we feel like we could get a lot more accomplished. So certainly a need to get that information out, to cultivate excitement, pride in, and participation in these programs, and really find a central way to communicate some of these ideas going forward. I am not seeing more questions. I'm going to keep rolling. Cultural resources and community amenities. Number 11 here, that we need to define and express Kiawah's culture as part of the island's vision. When the island originally expressed its vision, and through some of the existing development documents, the mission statements, there's certainly an understanding of what the place is supposed to look and be. But over the last many years, last several decades, the island has really shaped a very specific culture that is something that really special, this mix between resort and family and environment, and recreation. And really there's a need to capture what that is in order to document it. There's certainly things that have come online in recent years where there's been disagreements about what is appropriate for Kiawah, and some of that is the lack of having laid down exactly what that cultural element it is. And there's some disagreements about what is appropriate. And so we really want to craft language that expresses these facets into clear values, really enshrine these values into long-term and regulatory planning mechanisms, so that there's not questions when something comes online to say, is this right? Is this wrong? Certainly, even in this planning exercise that we've been doing here, we've said certain things that have raised individuals' eyebrows and said, whoa, that doesn't make sense here for Kiawah. When we said, okay, but we need to all be in agreement about what that is, so that we can have that written in places. Certainly, if other folks are coming from the outside with a desire to develop something or plan something, that they can see exactly what it is. And that's just something any municipality or place develops over time, is the ability to put that into words. And so really that's an exercise that needs to happen here. Number 12, encourage the development of programs and services that improve the delivery of cultural activities to all of Kiawah Island and its visitors. Certainly there's the role that Arts and Cultural Events Council is playing, but there's a sense that there might be a greater need that we're hearing more and more as folks are living in this place day to day, not just as a resort where they're here occasionally, but as they're here full time, to see a little bit more of cultural vibrancy. And sort of understanding what that is, So now you can start to see how all these issues are very complex and interrelated as we're talking about the deployment of some other commercial entities. Can they also, how do we ensure that they also have a kind of a cultural facet to them? How do we also ensure that they're appropriate? To point number 11. So all these become very, very interrelated by the end here. Determine a means to assess the diverse cultural needs of the population and foster some creative programming. So all that under number 12 here. Under number 13 is champion the history of Kiawah as a compelling facet of the island's culture. In the grand scheme, Kiawah is really, really young, and this happens with most any community. There's a certain point where you realize, oh, we've got enough history here that we should be telling our history. Certainly here, there is the indigenous occupation of this place. There is the kind of the colonial era events that were occurring here, some of these structures that are still remaining on the island, but even just the present contemporary history of how do we arrive at this place, how is it developed, and really making sure that that's an important part of the island's culture. Even some of this archaeological and historic resources that have not yet been fully explored and captured in an important way, it does become an important part of your culture, and so we want to make sure that that's being done. But now we're finally probably just at a place where we can look back and say, yes, there's history here even since the 1980s that's worth telling. I drink a little water because I'm talking a lot. See. Okay, so I have chat and I have Q&A. So let me get through these two, and then I'll get to the chat comments as well. I didn't realize they were happening over there. Number 14, establish a process for regularly conducting and community appraisals of existing community amenities, gaps, barriers, and needs. The previous notion about this was looking at it from it was sort of similar language around commercial needs. This is a similar gaps study that should be going on, but are more around these community facilities, things that are not commercial needs that bring in a return on investment, but things that are a little bit more recreational in nature, cultural, social in nature. We certainly heard a lot of people in the feedback say looking for just kind of informal gathering places, that, things that we would think of as like parks or plazas where folks can get together. It certainly presents an interesting question here at Kiawah, where the town cannot likely put something like a public park behind the gate without then making that a public entity, was still having the gate in place. So there's some really complex questions about that. Who is someone who would be providing some of that, and some actually kind of moving into question number 15 as well, is who would be providing these high quality civic spaces if there's not a return on there. And so it might be a little bit more complex to ask the resort to do that. There's questions obviously then coordinating with Kika, with others about it. So really just making sure that these places are delivered, figuring out who's the most appropriate body to do it. And lastly, making sure that these places are in line with the character of Kiawah, while also fostering a sense of community. So understanding what is appropriate to the very specific character that exists here. All right, let me see. You've been jumping to chat, assuming some of these. How can we communicate our goals of preservation, respect for Kiawah's wildlife, habitat, natural resources to our huge influx of visitors? We certainly, we were mentioning the importance of environmental education. You'll see that question or that goal going forward here. There's a big push for centralized communication. I think with the breakdown in the various parties that existed here across the island, I think that lack of who is the one clear information source is something that we've heard be problematic again and again. So how do we define who that is, who's in charge of that, how these other various entities are coming together to inform that information source? So you'll see that come up very, very soon here. Great question. But visitors are certainly someone we want to make that. There's questions about do all of the present visitors understand all the rules here about heard they come again about where they're leaving bikes, around towels on porches, all these different things. So certainly need for a little bit greater information. This is a long one. I'm trying to read it quickly. There is a note about acquiring land for affordable housing in conjunction with Johns Island and others. We'll get to housing. This will reduce the number of people commuting long distances every day. Yeah, absolutely. That's where some of that housing that we mentioned earlier. So it's got dedicated points. I think we'll get to all of that later. I will just say this, yeah, the notion too of some of these of number 14 of establishing an understanding of needs of community amenities, but also the previous point about commercial amenities. There's not only an issue of just what, but there's also an issue of where those things lie. As we were mentioning here, this need to reduce reliance upon singular occupant vehicular trips. That's absolutely huge. And so many of those trips right now are because there's not the ability to, certainly if folks are biking around in a casual way just for recreational purposes, it's great. But we do need actually commercial amenities and some of these specific amenities closer to folks so that is always the most convenient way is to walk or bike with some of these things. And right now, a lot of these things are car is the only option. And so when we talk about walkability and bikeability, folks in our industry, we're talking about not just a recreational option, but something that transforms people's day-to-day mobility, in the sense that I walk to the small corner shop to get milk, or I ride my bike over to this place to meet my friends after golf, or when we're walking back home from the beach, there's an ice cream shop right here on the way. And so that's just sort of part of our journey. So yeah, some of that is an issue not only of what, but also where to reduce trips for that same concern. Which perfectly tees us up for this next section, transportation and mobility. Number 16, maintain the island's roadway system to provide safe and efficient mobility routes for residents, businesses, visitors, and service providers. So yeah, this is about maintaining the current systems, making sure there's compatibility with improvements, that really there's a tie together of land use, of improvements, of character, and the environment. They're all sort of interrelated as you think about mobility planning. And we want to make sure we're increasing the functionality and the efficiencies of the existing roadway work, and then supporting regional roadway initiatives between Kiawah, Seabrook Island, Johns Island, and Greater Charleston. So even outside the gate, beyond Betsy Carrison, Bohicket, other places, are there places that mobility improvements can be supportive of the way that residents, visitors here use their roadway system. So that's basic sort of maintenance, upkeep, making sure that what we have is efficient. So slightly different here. Number 17 is then, as we mentioned previously, come to some of these large scale mobility changes to address constraints in the existing network. As we said before, there will always be existing constraints, just the way that some of this has been built out. So just considering if there's are fundamental changes to the street network or other mobility network systems, whether they're viable. That's about the roadway network. It's about bike network, including access points, intersections, ways that we're treating the security gate. So really just, this is, as you can see here, these last 3 action verbs related to this ones are about studies. This is about dreaming big, to study what possibilities exist, thinking beyond just sort of the band-aids of the existing system to really whole-scale ideas that promote new uses. And with all of these, I think there's sort of a given is making sure those things are appropriate to the character, the scale, the experience of Kiawah. Lastly, this is just pointing out how land use and development patterns are related to those. And that goes back to the previous point of just saying if some of these amenities and uses are closer to folks' homes, those are some critical ways to allow folks to not be reliant upon their car to get to some of these things. For folks in our industry, we know the reason, the whole reason that road rage exists as a concept, and I hate to bring this up, is because when you're sitting in a car, the only expectation is that you're supposed to be moving forward in this sort of channel. And if you're not moving forward, that can be really frustrating. Where so many of these other systems are so much more pleasant to walk or bike and not be held up in those ways. And so we really want to, think about land use patterns and development patterns that contribute those more pleasant, more safe mobility options that we think are very much in line with the spirit of this place. Number 18, advance and promote mobility alternatives as safe, pleasant, and viable means to get around the island beyond individual vehicular traffic. Again, this is here just studying these alternative modes, be it walking, biking, and other, asking if there's a question, appropriate forms of shared transit. As we said, right now, there's a number of subsidized transit options that are happening on the island because of the resort and others. There is some redundancy. So how do we reduce those? Is there something that could provide that could be transformed into an island-wide benefit that's open to everyone, some type of circulator bus that gets folks around? But all these other things, from our perspective, obviously the biking system is great, but it is missing some critical pieces, some safety call boxes, some mile markers, some other things that could increase its safety. There's places where cycling traffic is interacting in the road, in places with dangerous curves, where there's not a sense of safety there. So certainly, if you were leaning into that and increasing or wanting to increase the use of these alternative modes, there's some major steps that could be taken for that. So yeah, just encouraging not only studying how to make them better, but also really encouraging these alternative means of transit. Big shifts in mobility, getting folks out of their cars requires that everyone kind of be on the same page as to how we're shifting, how we're encouraging these other uses of thinking of things like, if I'm going to meet my friends, let's all bike there. You kind of need to be on the same page. And so thinking about ways that the town and the island can encourage some of those changes. And yeah, this is the same last point. I'm kind of blurring them all together now because I'm trying to explain the complexity of the way that these things are all interrelated. But number 19, determine if they need to exist for current or future shared transit options. And that's exactly what I was mentioning earlier, just these shared transit systems that exist now, determining which agency, if any, should or could provide some sort of shared transit systems. There's so many options here that exist these days, and just not sure if anyone has really given some thought as to what, if any, of those would make sense for Kiawah. So making sure someone is thinking about that. And a lot of these things, I think we would end it that way with make sure someone's thinking about this, so it's just not missing. And these are the kind of things that, again, if folks' eyes are in the day-to-day, they aren't thinking about big picture trends that are coming down the pipeline. All right, let's see. No new questions or comments. I will keep moving. Public services and infrastructure, number 20. I've alluded to this now several times, but systematize interagency coordination across all of Kiawah stakeholders. This is just one of those absolute critical ones here. Every entity that we've talked to has said absolutely there's a willingness and an appetite to communicate better, to collaborate better across these various public and private organizations that oversee facets of Kiawah. So many folks are providing essential community services in different ways. Right now, those are just distinct entities with different goals, but really making sure that there's a definition of the roles, the responsibility of each players, that folks are sharing their goals and resources in a collaborative and transparent manner so that everyone knows what's important to each other, so that there can be working together in places that's a little bit more efficient than it is today, so the ball's not getting dropped, really seeking to reduce and remove any of the redundant efforts. And so that goes with all these various stakeholders, all of which I think I've called out at different points here now. It does make the island unique, and we would appreciate the roles that all these folks are taking on, but there's certainly a sense that interagency coordination can do a lot more, including, lastly, we haven't said this yet, but just this better working relationship with Charleston County in terms of utilities, infrastructure, mobility, and a number of other things. So on top of the folks that are here on the island, there are great folks as well that need partnership. Number 21, established a centralized communication channel across entities to reach Kiawah's population. And I teased this one earlier, but yeah, when all of these different entities have their own communication tools, there's eBlast, there's social media, there's different entities that have text-based tools. I think it's very useful for each of those individual institutions, but it is causing some confusion. I think it sounds like there's a bit of communication fatigue with folks getting too much information from too many parties, and really the desire to have a more central communication central channel. It's not only good for users to have sort of focused information, but it's also critical if you're talking about emergency situations, other situations of that type, where people have sort of unquestioning knowledge about where to go to get the exact information, and there's not communication coming from different parties that makes it confusing. So want to make sure that has happened, that single recognizable source that folks can follow. So just really defining what that is, what the channel is, what tools to use it, and sort of how to best reach audiences is a great goal. Number 22, establish a process for regularly conducting utility assessments. This now we've seen across commercial entities, civic entities, and now this is just a third one in terms of just this understanding of needs, and now just talking about utility. So we got to check all those boxes, making sure that we're understanding long-term needs, gaps, barriers, and future needs. There are some present issues specifically around the cellular service, things that we mentioned previously about securing access to additional water from the county. There are some big utility needs that are sort of outstanding, but are currently being thought about. But even beyond that, as making sure we're thinking about future technologies that are going on. How do we think about, something as simple as like, EV charging stations? Who does that belong to? Who does that respond to? So certainly someone thinking about the future here with all of these utilities. Number 23, increase education and transparency and regulatory and developmental process for everyone involved. So certainly, I think you ask anyone, they have probably had some sort of negative or positive experience around developing, building out, making changes to their home. And there's been a sense that some of those tools and some of those processes, because they span several organizations, have not been clear, have not been logical, and have been somewhat opaque, and also have been sometimes subjective in nature. So really just trying to get an understanding of how to make these tools as clear, as logical, and transparent as possible, so that everyone understands what these developmental and regulatory processes are for, what value they're creating for residents, for visitors, and how some of these things, we can make them as efficient as possible. Some are just inherently require a lot of steps, but at least we can understand what these phases are and where we fit into them. Really, and it's about providing educational resources. This communication tool that we've discussed earlier is probably a certain important way of serving that. And also just having this communication across these organizations will also help streamline that process as well. And in general, number 24, maintain professional development and training for town council, boards, committees, and staff. Yes, it is to everyone's benefit for everyone involved who's thinking about the town and town goals to be at the top of their game, to making sure they have the tools and resources they need to adequately address municipal priorities, really investing in education here. We have gotten 24 out of 36, so we are doing well. Don't see new questions or comments, so I will keep moving along. Appreciate y'all's patience following along. All important stuff. Number 25, we're now into safety and resiliency. Number 25, provide residents, non-resident property owners, and visitors with a safe and secure environment. Certainly that seems like a given, and it's something that we always should be doing, but there are questions that are lingering around here in terms of determining a strategy for existing law enforcement and first responders long-term. You'll see that in number 26 as well, but I just want to make sure that they're adequately addressing safety concerns. We've chatted with all of these folks as part of our stakeholder engagement and realized some constraints there that need to be lifted, so some planning around that. There's also some regulatory supports that could be increased to help continue feeling like a safe and secure environment. So it's definitely not something you can sit on and be passive. You have to be active to always create that sense of safety and security. So make sure we're doing that. Number 26 is a really specific dedicated point, and that is about determining long-term law enforcement strategy that best protects Kiawah into the future, including these diverse entities, functions, and needs. And really, this is, again, this importance of coordinating across agencies to determine what works best, as well as defining the parties responsible for that oversight. So want to make sure that is accomplished. Luckily, I don't think that we heard anyone say that Kiawah was a place that feels unsafe to them. So you have the luxury of saying this place is functioning great right now, but as we think long-term, there's some ways that we can be planning for better here. Number 27, we want to monitor the continued adequacy of emergency preparedness plans, communicate regularly with the plans to stakeholders, entities, resident properties, owners, and visitors. Luckily, this place has not had to deal with extreme emergency or the effects of that as of recently. Some of that is due to great planning, but we should make sure all those plans are continue to be refined, that they're exercised, that some of this equipment and tools get battle tested occasionally, and make sure that they're working and functioning properly. And then also, as this communication points have talked about earlier, that there's a regularly communicated to all the entities involved, including residents, so people know what to do, exactly what to do in times of emergencies, and can be ensure that the plans that are put before them are tested and are correct. This is also about checking in with all of emergency responders, making sure they have the tools and resources that they have. We love the utilities saying they have their small army ready to go for a storm event. So we just want to make sure everyone understands what those are and feels a real confidence in it. Cool. Number 28, establish a resiliency strategy for Kiawah. As I alluded to before, we're using resiliency in a very specific word, a very specific way. We used to kind of lump it in with sort of environmental sustainability, but now we think about resiliency as the ability of a place to withstand various shocks and stresses that might be thrown in it, whether that is environmental storm events. It also could be economic events. It could be any number of issues. It could be something, we didn't think something like a pandemic was possible 15, 20 years ago, but really kind of considering all of our various potential shocks and stresses that can hit a place. And really, most municipalities have understood the need to create a strong resiliency strategy that plans for these various needs. So we want to make sure that's happening here at Kiawah. Again, it makes it complex to go across all these various entities. So it is important that there be one entity with whom the buck stops with all of these issues that can be overseeing them. We want to do an assessment of the town's exposure to these various types of hazard shocks and stresses, and consider appropriate mitigation steps related to resources or funding that's needed for those tools going forward. Ooh, I see a question coming up. Good question here. What is the process for formal feedback from all of the relevant Ks prior to the finalization of the comp plan? Getting an input is essential and appropriate. However, knowing whether there is final buy-in or not is also important. Yeah, I mean, I think this plan is only so good as its ability to be actioned and implemented. All of the various stakeholders here know that this plan is being processed. They have been involved in it various ways. There's certainly a level of outreach that will happen before any of this is set in stone. I don't think the town or anyone involved wants to create a plan that gets put on a shelf and collects dust, because it's not realistic. It doesn't have teeth to get things accomplished. So certainly there is an absolute need that this will be communicated back out. Some of the things are things that are about getting approval now, but some of them are just, that one of the goals is in and of itself create coordination going forward. So yeah, all these will be vetted by these groups. I don't think anything will be improved by council until it has done so. So yeah, that's certainly an important part of this. How those conversations look, how they will look, what this level of consensus will be, I don't think we know yet, but certainly everyone understands that it's critical before the end of this is done here. Land use and housing. So we get into the regulatory stuff that may not be as fun or exciting for people, but it's fun and exciting for us. Develop a more accurate data on Kiawah's present and future populations. Again, just this COVID shift really changed the nature of this place. People feel it, people talk about it, but one facet of it is that we don't have a full understanding of the demographics and the different user groups that are here now in this post-COVID world. A lot of anecdotal evidence, but no real hard and fast evidence. So that's something that the town needs to wrap up very soon here. We also think it's just really interesting. You kind of see this point number 29 in conjunction with point number 30. We are getting closer and closer to full island build out, and that really creates a prime time for the town, for the island to have a full understanding of what full build out looks like, an understanding of sort of ownership versus rental, full-time versus part-time, age trends, shifts, visitors, all of those notions, because so much of the planning that is required is related to those things. And Kiawah is actually just very unique in the sense that there are just hard and fast boundaries drawn around it, hard and fast understanding of what the full development build out would be. So there's no reason to not have a good understanding of those things, so that all this planning can be done so accordingly. And that as we think about future build out, future redevelopment, that it's all working inside of these bigger goals here. So if we're looking at number 29 in terms of people, number 30 then is the building and structural side of it. Quantify future development to understand full build out and its conditions, to really get an understanding of what these physical places are, the community services and facilities that needed to be matched to them, thinking about a land use plan going forward, seeing if it needs to be adjusted to accommodate future conditions, looking at the places that have been built out and if they are in line with the island's goals and its vision of itself, and if not, does the land use plan need to be changed at all? Is there any other regulatory tools that need to be changed in any ways to dictate the type of development we want going forward? Number 31, define distinct character areas across Kiawah as the means to protect and enhance existing communities while accommodating future needs. I think this is one of those fun and interesting things that as the build out of the island has occurred, so many of these neighborhoods have developed a kind of a distinct look and feel, a distinct culture. And we just want to make sure that those things are codified and enshrined so that if future development comes along that is complementary to those, not just physically what the places are, but also, as we were mentioning earlier, a little bit culturally as well, so that you really do continue to have these distinct neighborhoods, and you have this experience that navigating the island is visiting these different places that are special in their own right. And some of that just hasn't been fully codified yet in a way that can be ensured that it's captured going forward. It also we just want to really make sure that these places are celebrated in their own right for what they are. And then just determining if any regulatory mechanisms need to be adjusted to serve those ends. We're close, y'all. We're close. Number 31. All right. Number 32. Foster compatible mixed-use community nodes that complement the character of Kiawah. As we mentioned previously, there is a need to bring together where people live with some of these other commercial or civic entities. Excuse me. With these civic amenities, and right now the land use plan doesn't fully have a way to implement that. So we just wanted to determine what is a new land use designation that allows for this kind of neighborhood scale little mixed use node in a strategic location. So that's what I was saying earlier, imagining if you were walking up from the beach and you came to an intersection that maybe at one or two of the corners on that intersection, there would be a little small neighborhood shop that's got, some wine for you to grab there, some ice cream, some snacks, or just kind of a little snack food or groceries that kind of allows that to be part of your cycle. A little coffee shop maybe mixed in, a little neighborhood. Right now, those things aren't really allowed because of the way that the place was built. So just determining what that would look like, and that for a lot of us, that is a change, a kind of little bit slight shift in mentality of what this place is. And so really want to recognize here, this is where we have the regulations at our disposal to control the look and feel of what these places are. So this isn't something that's going to feel out of place here. We can make something that's absolutely in line with the character of the island, that feels actually in some ways maybe more like this great little kind of small town coastal little village. And so want to figure out what that looks like. And right now we just haven't had someone thinking on exactly what that is. So we want to make sure that that's something that's feasible and at the end of the day feels appropriate to Kiawah before we move forward with it. Number 33, cultivate an understanding of housing needs. We mentioned this earlier. We were talking about it in the big picture umbrella concerns, but really laying it out here. You'll see again, all of these action verbs here are really about studying things, studying whether additional housing types could serve the community's needs or goals. Is there a slightly smaller, slightly more affordable housing type that allows young families to plug in to kind of have their first connection here with the island. I think that Kiawah Island, the real estate told us I think it's something like I think it's something like 75% of folks who buy here have had multiple experiences visiting the island. So what is it that we allow that kind of first time user? How do we allow them to plug in and spend some time here earlier? And so understanding what those needs are, studying the demographics with regards to housing, including user groups, family types, needs that might be happening, various ways that they want to visit, and then just determining the housing types, formats, or the value of affordability to both the existing residents and also potential prospective residents. So this is also, again, where in the ways that we do have to think about the island a little as a business, we have to think about ensuring that there's sort of a transfer from existing customers to future ones as potentially as folks age out, no longer want to be here, and whatnot. There's just a new population that's coming along that's just equally as excited about this place. Number 34, develop a strategy to advocate for workforce housing for Kiawah's labor force. Yeah, certainly we whoever had alluded to that in the comments before. This was hands down, no questions asked, the number one concern of all of the employers on the island, was just the difficulty that employees have been forced to kind of move farther and farther away as the development has happened. On all of these island, everything between here and Charleston Greater, there's just not a viable place for workforce folks to live. Someone needs to be, thinking about this. This is critical. This has huge effects on everyone's day-to-day experience in terms of raising the prices on the services that you need, the quality of the service that you have. If we can't get good employees, every employer told us attracting, retaining talent was extremely difficult. They're having big turnover in staff, which again affects everyone's user experience. So they're not exactly sure who is meant to do this right now, but really just kind of working with employment centers to understand what the employee housing needs are, determine which entity or entities is best suited to provide workforce housing. That's not known at this time. This just hasn't been a question that's been asked yet. It's about defining locations. They include access to basic goods, services, mobilities, and other options. So could be anywhere. This isn't at all suggesting that it needs to be on the island, but what this is suggesting is that it's that someone, in this instance, the town, be responsible for just ensuring that the study is being done, making sure this is something that's being taken into consideration. It's easy to kind of say, can the resort house its folks or something like that? It only accounts for one employer of many here on the island that need to be considered. So really just making sure this is considered. And again, this is about affecting overall quality of life for everyone here. So moving into priority investments. Again, this is a little less known at this time because so much of this is a derivative of what this other work is. But number 35, establishing a capital improvement plan. So just ensuring there's a singular resources that expresses and prioritizes the needs of Kiawah, confirming this tool is expressed in the comprehensive plan, that it captures the needs of all the various stakeholders. So it's not just about what does the town need to spend, but it's also about what can these other entities, these various Ks, what should we all be honing in on as important investments, and really making it clear that there's a transparent, logical distribution strategy for these municipal funds that residents can understand and be clear of and know what's being accomplished in what order and what resources are being paired to it, so everyone can see that with clarity. Lastly, then this is a very particular one that's very particular to Kiawah, but then focusing the town's investments on priorities, those priorities identified as critical to the resiliency of the island. This is a place that is in some ways very strong, has built out lots of ways to be resilient. There's other areas where it is vulnerable, and we just want to ensure that these resiliency needs that haven't been previously addressed, that haven't been previously concerned, are brought forward to the priority with some of these municipal funds, so that we can sort of reduce any vulnerable spots that are found as soon as possible, and really just making sure that there's a price tag on the cost of some of these acute shocks and stresses, so that we can understand the need for investing in these resiliency efforts. So that's it, you guys. We've gotten through 36 of these. It is 11:23. we are now here to chat as much as y'all want. Looks like we got 17 participants here. Happy to answer any questions y'all might have that you might not have already brought up, either using the chat function or chiming in to ask. I will say in general, this is a lot to process. So for that reason, like I said, we have posted this slide deck on the website as well. We have left an open-ended format spot for you to come and leave any input you have. This is an ongoing question or ongoing conversation, really, truly, that we're having in the course of this comp plan. So welcome any feedback today or anytime going forward. But if you want to discuss now, happy to do so. I'm going to turn off my screen share so I can see your faces if folks do have questions. We answered all. I would be surprised and impressed, but happy if we covered all the bases here. I'm just double checking then that I'll be. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a thought. It might be helpful if you explained. Some of us probably already heard it and know, but explain how you see the document coming together in the sense that there is a regulatory requirement and a lot of what we've seen here in terms of suggestions and speculation on where to go and how to get there involves a lot of discussion and a lot of what I would call narrative. How do you see that coming together in a document? Because we do have to obviously clearly reflect the requirements of the law under certain categories, but I'm sure you also want to communicate a lot more under some of the thoughts than the category would allow.
Sure. So the 10 state requirements do not, it requires that we study all of those 10 areas, but in terms of how the document is delivered, it does not have to be, directly delivered in a way where the document sits within those 10 categories and organized in that order. So I think for us, this is from Andy. For those who don't know, Andy, who is one of our gracious planning commissioners as well. I see others on here who are, oh, you're sharing the screen, Andy. I don't know if you meant to do that.
Okay.
But we, for us, a very, very early ask from the Planning Commission was that we make a final document that's approachable, that's legible, that average folks can pick up, but it's also that it's actionable. And so I think for us, once we pull together all of this information, making sure that it is really clear, easy to read, that I appreciate you using the word narrative, that the narrative sort of tie that runs together is there. I think we're getting closer and closer to it. I mean, even some of the language of the categorical labels that you're seeing today, we've softened up and tried to make it a little less plannery jargon. And I think that we will organize that around that, as well as we've mentioned before. There's a sense that there's a little bit of slight redundancy in some of the points, that we have to say things a couple of times across a few categories just because of where they land. And I think when we kind of get into the final document, we can really streamline those so that they only occur, once or twice, and that it becomes clear, once we have an understanding of who's taking on a certain role, that we can just say X entity is doing X with this priority, and then just lump all of that underneath there in terms of all of what the action steps are. And I think that'll start to really make this not feel like this all-encompassing thing, but a more structured framework that has action steps that someone can take a bite in, accomplish, and get moving in a really clear way. And I think that's a goal from us and something we do a lot in our plan. So not something at all that's foreign to us. I don't know if that's helpful. That's vague. I think the big picture sense is that it's part of the refining as we go step by step. That's equally parts of it, is how we craft the final structure of the document. Other folks got questions? Let's see. It looks sad. Looks like something. Are you going to as a question? Are you going to prioritize some of the goals? Will you have a criteria that shows when you feel comfortable? Yes, so we will absolutely. I'll scan back up to this. Give me 1 second. I'll share this again. So we plan to certainly have an implementation matrix on the final deliverable. I can't find my control panel right now. It's disappeared. Where is it? There it is. One of the precedent plan that we were looking here, the way that it is organized, you can see the listing of goals, the implementation steps, of kind of a breakdown of what the actual steps are, the party is. This time frame, I think certainly a column that's missing here that sounds like we need to do here is have something that dictates both what things are a priority, but then also through the time frame column as well helps us explain that they need to get going today, tomorrow, or that they're more long term. Certainly there are parts of this that will be low hanging fruit, that it's might be something really simple. If it's like, hey, we just need a single information channel and it's going to be X and someone's going to set it up, that might be low hanging fruit. Where some of this other things are very, very long term projects if you're talking about some major infrastructure changes. And so we want to make sure that that's clear and that everyone involved understands that, so no one thinks that the town is promising or committing something that's not the case. Certainly I think everyone involved wants there to be all transparency around that going forward. Let me see. There was more to that question. I want to make sure I'm answering it. Where did it go? Will you have criteria that shows when you feel comfortable that goals have been met? I think with goals, we want to make sure they're measurable. And so certainly there will be a nature or a notion of what is measurable in terms of that goal. So I think it should be clear for folks reading it to understand where the town is, and the town will obviously be communicating outwardly through any of these efforts where it is with those. Yes, obviously we'll be ongoing. Joanne. Oh, Joanne's here. Hey, Joanne. Joanne, can you please invite people to contact any of the planning commissioner members with questions or concerns as well, as they are the ones responsible for the plan? Yeah, that's a great, the planning commissioners are the ones who carry this work out day to day. They're the ones that take this playbook and carry it out. So certainly, please feel free to reach out to them. They are your representatives in this capacity in this process. So reach out, let them know if you have questions either now or going forward into the plan. Paul, what is the timeline? Jumping back to this slide, we kind of have this sort of laid out loosely right now, or each of these columns where we're acting over about a month for each of these, but this is a process where we're not moving forward until we kind of are comfortable that we've accomplished each of these. So right now, thinking 2 to 3 months going forward, but moving forward with the absolute confidence is the key here. Double checking I've gotten all these. Blah, blah, blah. That one. Right, so I got these questions. Let me go back and look at the chat. Someone just noting the county is updating its comp plan. The town resort and developer should work with the county and residents of Johns Island to identify and acquire land to build affordable housing. Oh, it's okay. That's the. Okay. Right. I think we got all these. Okay. Well, we're hanging out here in case folks pop in and out. Looks like folks are dropping. Happy to keep discussing anything, either verbal questions, question answer, or chat. Thank you, Harry. I'll post it again. Kara posted it earlier. Post the link to webpage where all this is posted. We do have an open-ended format, so if you want to go leave anything, you can look at these slides again. It is a lot to process. I realize if you're unfamiliar with this, it is a bit drinking through a fire hose. Please take your time, read, and provide any feedback. And still feel free to come by and see us this afternoon in person if you want to chat more. Ooh, I think we got more. When I went to the, Cindy says, when I went to the link, it didn't go through to the slide deck. Is that posted? Oh, I think it was. Oh, okay, we will fix that right now. Thank you, Cindy. Click the second one. All right. Got a team of us over here getting it. I've got the link. Are you have it open, Kara? Oh, got it. I'll do it real fast. Oh, got it. Got it. Can you? Yeah, refresh it and see if that works. File.
Excel, no, when you have to order it, like the second. It's also nice to have this people.
Try now. No. We'll get this working real quick here. I don't know what's going on here.
I think I saw something earlier, it's just something like that, but I was finding chicken.
That's. Yeah. Oh. yeah.
Yes.
It just says save. Save.
Oh, so that's-
Did they get it? What in the world am I doing this stuff a new link?
Wait, but that's okay.
Mhm.
You have to check it.
Usually
Without
there's
the
like an
settings.
apply button.
Like the little, what you just did earlier.
Mhm.
And then the file,
Okay.
and then you have to like click it. Yeah. And then so. And so,
Let me see. Wondering it. Try now. Technology, it's our friend. Here, I can just put the web address there. I think there's like normally. Oh. Save. That would be better. Can I just send you that? It's in your,
it's a shortcut file. That's how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Is that as an icon?
maybe. Can I?
No, that's fine.
Here, I'll just give you this too.
You might try to open the file.
All right, working on that. Andy, what are some of the items presented that are already included in the town ordinances shown as new needs? As we recall saying, are we saying reviewing town ordinances to determine if they are still current and required? Yes, absolutely. I think the next phase of this, once we get into actioning and implementing, is going to be inventorying what things are already being addressed through other places and what needs to be updated if it's not current, or what if it's not leading to the outcomes as desired that need to be changed. I don't know if Cindy's cut away. Thank you. This is very informative. Yeah, well thought. Thank you. We have full tech support on the website right now. the refresh options. Ooh, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Do we have, don't know if we got new folks popping by, but if you do, feel free to jump in and ask questions. See Madeline. Hey, Madeline, see you here yet? All right, we'll hang a little bit longer in case other folks pop by. All right. Website is updated. Content's available. Yeah, get rid of that one. All right, it is 11:55. Well, anyone that's on the call has any more questions or comments, happy to take them. Otherwise, we will probably start shutting things down. We're giving folks to noon. So new folks are popping in. Let's say that as someone new appears. Hey Ross, how you doing? Ross, if you're trying to speak, you are muted.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. How are you?
Oh, fine. How are you?
Good, good. We went through some content earlier, went through some question and answer. So we were kind of hanging to see if we had additional folks who popped in. So happy to answer any questions if you want. I realize you haven't seen anything, but also we're posting stuff on our website if you want to glance at that.
Okay, I saw and heard your first hour from
Okay,
10 until 11, then I had something at 11, so now I'm back just see if there's anything else that I missed.
cool. All right, that makes me feel a little better that you got some of that. Anything surprising, exciting, concerning to you, or?
It sounds like the town of Kiawah is doing more strategic planning than's been done in the past. Is that fair to say?
No.
That is very fair to say.
Okay. Good.
I was hoping that was the answer. Good.
Okay,
cool.
well, I know you're. I don't really have any other questions.
All right. Well, great.
Okay,
Glad you were able to attend some of it then. Thanks for popping back by.
okay, have a good meeting. Have a good day too.
Thank you much.
Rest of the day. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, y'all. Well, we'll go ahead and call it. I'm afraid if anyone else chimes in, it's last minute and a half. We won't have much to engage on that. Thanks for sticking with us, Andy.
No
Greg.
problem.
See ya. Maybe today. If not, see you soon, Andy. Bye.